Hello, welcome to you all. In today's session, let's look into Kafka main component or what are the Kafka building blocks. We can say Kafka is a messaging system or a FIFO, first in, first out queue, or a publisher subscription messaging system or a kind of real time streaming platform. It's time to get to know the main components of or building blocks of Kafka. Here we go. In today's session, let's explore the key Kafka terminologies in order to understand the Kafka course better. This is first part of Kafka terminologies and we will see the second part shortly from now. Let's start with messages. Messages are kind of records, otherwise they are kind of array of information. They are byte of arrays that can store any object in any format, be it JSON, XML, CSV, anything like that. A record has four attributes, namely key and value are the mandatory. Other than that, you can have other attributes followed by timestamp and headers. These are optional, that is, timestamp, headers, and other attributes are all optional. The value can be whatever needs to be sent. For example, either it can be in a JSON or in a plain text format. By default, the size of the message is 1 MB and it is configurable using configuration files. You can send very large messages through Kafka topics with a long retention policy. As of now, based upon my experience, seems to be working fine so far. So, in simple terms, messages are atomic unit of Kafka. So the Kafka message is a small or a medium piece of data which is generally we use. The messages are nothing but simple array of information or bytes of information. There is no specific syntax exist for the Kafka messages. And another thing you need to remember is a message is a kind of key value pair associated with the metadata. The Kafka can handle over millions of messages and it has the ability to scale up that we have seen in the earlier presentation. The Kafka message is a small or medium piece of data that can be that can be used by the consumers. By default, as I mentioned earlier, it is 1 MB in size, but based upon requirement, this size can be altered in the configuration setup as seen in the bottom of the screen. Messages are formed and sent by a center called producer in Kafka terminology, which we will be seeing in today's session as a last section. This producer sent a message to a topic only at a time. We are going to see about topic also in this session. So if you look into the sample message on the right hand side, as I mentioned, it need to have key and a value that is mandatory and other fields are all optional. You can have any attributes associated with your message. It may have a timestamp that tells about when the message is framed and also it can provide information like headers. Headers can provide information like a destination point, port, any other value. So, like I mentioned, you can have any format that can be formed as a message as part of the Kafka. So, that's a very brief introduction about messages. Now, let us explore it into topics. Topics can be defined. You can think of a topic as a category where applications can add, process, or reprocess the records, that is, messages. Basically, logical categories of messages are all called as topics. That is, every topics contain related messages together. Say, for example, if you take a topic like logging or log information, It will have messages related to logs, application logs, something like that. Say, for example, application logs is a kind of topic where application log messages are all stored one after another. We can say a stream of the same type of data or message is called as a topic. Here, every message is sent to a topic in the order in which they are received and held up inside a topic. Messages are sent as well as received from a topic. Usually, messages are sent to topic from a producer. Messages are received from a topic by the consumers. We'll see about those two building blocks in the succeeding sections or in the succeeding classes. If you look here in the message, we have a topic by name application log, which contain only logs related to the application. We have another topic by name database logs, which contain logs related to databases. Something like when the database is started up, when it was restarted, or when it was shut down, something like that, are all the messages which will be pushed into the topic by name database log. Now let's move on to the next key topic that's called partition. Partitions are a kind of storage for the topics. All partitions are all ordered and uniquely numbered and that cannot be changed. That is, they are immutable. Say partitions are number ordered something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and you cannot change it. Kafka create these partitions. Usually, the records or messages inside the partitions are numbered in sequential way and is called as offset. When a message arrives Kafka, a partition is selected and a message offset is assigned in the sequential order by Kafka. If the partition ID is specified, then Kafka will pick the messages and route the message to the specified partition. If a topic can have one or multiple number of partitions. In the diagram shown on the right hand side, if you see here, a topic has two partition numbered as partition number 1 and 0. That's what shown here in this diagram. If a new message arrives, if the partition ID is not specified, Kafka will choose the partition ID and sends a message to the last offset of the partition, somewhere here. Partitions are all created like a shared approach, SHARD approach, that is being followed in the databases. That is, messages are added one after another in partition. When number of messages goes up, additional partitions are all created and added up into the new partition. It's a kind of horizontal scaling. So if you look into this message, if you look into this diagram, we have a message and and messages that are all part of a topic called application logs. This topic can have two partition or more. In this particular example, I have two partitions. So the messages are all pushed one after another in a sequential fashion. If a message has a partition ID specified, then messages will get into the last offset. If messages do not have the partition ID, Kafka has an ability to change the partition number based upon the usage and then assign that message to the particular partition. That's why Kafka has an ability to scale up or down based upon the need. The numbers are sequential and they are all called as message offset. Now let's move on to producers. A producer is the Kafka client that publishes messages to a Kafka topic. That is, applications that send data into topics are known as Kafka producers. The producer is responsible for producing the messages in the Kafka. Producer, otherwise called as publisher of messages, which publish the message to one or more number of Kafka topic. We can create number of producers in a Kafka environment. That is, if you have a Kafka environment, you can have n number of producers that can publish messages into a Kafka environment. So while sending messages to Kafka, you can specify a partition number, that is partition ID can be hard coded, or partition ID need not be specified and allows the Kafka to select one among the partition which is available, or partition ID can be selected based upon some logic or the rules that you can externalize it. So when the message before reaching to Kafka, it can provide the correct partition ID which is dynamically generated using the logic or rules, and thereby the Kafka can select the right partition ID. So these are the three different options available while sending messages to Kafka. Producer pick up a partition ID if partition ID is not supplied along with the messages while creating a message in Kafka, or use existing partition ID to send messages to partition ID. In the event of non-availability of partition ID, as I mentioned earlier, Kafka picks up random partition and places the message in the partition. Such a selection is based on balancing number of participation inside the Kafka topic. This is to ensure that the scalability nature of the Kafka. Next, multiple producer application could be connected to the Kafka environment or the Kafka cluster. As I mentioned earlier, producer is also called as publishers. Once they publish the message or send the message to Kafka, they won't worry about the next step. That is how the producer and the consumers. That's how the producer and the consumers are all decoupled with each other. A producer can be an upstream server application that is producing logs, or a client application sending user website activity. If you look into this diagram, if you look into this diagram, a client application or a producer can produce messages and send it to a topic. In this particular diagram, you can see a topic which uses three different partitions. If a message has a partition number, then it will go it into the first partition as mentioned here, and the message is written at the end. If a message doesn't have a partition number, Kafka has the ability to choose the partition number between these three partitions and put the message at the end. If a message doesn't have a partition number, but it has a logic or rule using which it can generate the partition ID and will be supplied along with the message, and it can find its partition number and put the message at the end. With that, we end up today's session. Let us continue for the rest of the building blocks in the next session. I hope this video is helpful to you. If so, please subscribe and post your comments. That will truly helpful to me to improve my presentation in future. Thank you. See you in the next session.